Okay, let's dive right into today's explainer because we are looking at a tiny village with a sporting legacy that is, well, it's honestly hard to believe. When we think about Olympic powerhouses, right, we usually picture massive, state funded megacenters in huge cities. But today, we're tossing that idea out the window. We're heading to Helcmanovce. It's a small municipality in Slovakia that somehow quietly built a world class reputation in luge. Literally, one of the most thrilling, downright dangerous winter sports on the planet. The story of this town is an absolute masterclass in community resilience. It shows us exactly what happens when an entire village rallies around one high-speed dream.
And I really want to hook you immediately with these statistics because they prove this is not just your average town. It's a true national anomaly. Helcmanovce actually boasts a continuous 65-year tradition in luge. Plus, they have the highest number of Olympians per capita in all of Slovakia. I mean, just think about that for a second. But here's the kicker, the fact that absolutely blew my mind. The local primary school is the only one in the entire nation that actually grades kids on luge. Yeah, it's a formal part of their curriculum. Imagine being 10 years old and your report card grade depends on your sled aerodynamics. It's just brilliant.
Part 1. A world-class luge cradle. So, how did they even pull this off? Well, we have to trace their roots way back to the 1960s. Back then, it was just pure, raw determination driving these athletes, way before any official infrastructure even existed. They didn't have high-tech aerodynamic suits or, carbon fiber sleds. They had heavy, wooden recreational sleds. And because Helcmanovce is a historic mining town, pretty much every family had a heavy miner's helmet laying around. So what did they do? The early athletes simply strapped on those miner's helmets and practically hurled themselves down natural icy paths. It was dangerous, it took immense courage, and it was basically grassroots sports in its absolute purest form.
And their legendary, almost mythical work ethic actually became a benchmark globally. Get this. The story goes that ahead of the Sapporo Olympics, a delegate from Japan was complaining to the committee about how insanely difficult it was to build their own track. Well, Bert Isitich, the former president of the International Luge Federation, who had actually been to Helcmanove and watched the locals literally toiling in the snow, just looked right at the delegate and said, "If you had people from Helcmanove, you wouldn't have problems." Talk about a mic drop, right? Their sheer dedication was recognized at the very top of the sport. Part 2. Building the original track. Now, look at this. The community eventually had to just take matters into their own hands to build a proper facility. There were no massive government bailouts coming to save the day. They did enter a national mass sports competition for some initial funding, but it barely scratched the surface. So they rely on themselves. We're talking entire families, grandparents, kids, out there manually packing snow with shovels to build these high, curved wooden walls for a naturally cooled track. They successfully finished it in 1975, but maintaining it was exhausting. They literally had to mix snow with water and freeze it to get that perfect icy glaze. When they finally opened it, it wasn't just a race. It was a huge cultural milestone. They even had a local brass band playing right out there in the freezing snow to celebrate. The track instantly became the absolute beating heart of the community. It finally gave all those hardworking locals a true home ground to turn their kids into elite competitors. Part 3. 2 decades of glory. Once that original track was up and running, the results were just explosive. It served them reliably for over 20 years. By the early 90s, they were turning local school kids into literal national champions. During this golden era, practically every kid in the village was involved in the luge club. And as they leveled up, so did their gear. They ditched the miners' helmets and eventually upgraded to legendary East German sleds, which the locals affectionately called Pilky. The whole era climaxed when they hosted massive events like the 1991 Czechoslovak People Championships. The town was just a thriving, unstoppable ecosystem of talent. But every golden era faces challenges. Tracing this timeline, you can see their momentum was going straight up until it hit a brick wall. The 1995 to 1996 season marked the very last race ever held on their beloved wooden track. Internationally, the sport had shifted entirely to artificially cooled, high-tech tracks. The natural wooden setup in Helcmanovce just couldn't keep up with changing climates and strict new modern standards. And just like that, the racing heart of the community stopped beating. Part 4. 30 years of makeshift training. Sadly, we have to pivot this explainer to a pretty stark reality. For almost 30 years now, this legendary, historic club has not had a home training track. They don't even have a basic gymnasium. I mean, try to wrap your head around that. Producing Olympic-level athletes in a high-speed sliding sport Without a track to slide on and without an indoor gym to practice those critical explosive starts, it's wild. They went from fostering national champions in their own backyard to basically becoming sports nomads. Because this critical infrastructure is completely missing, the current generation faces, frankly, absurd hurdles just to practice. These kids are incredibly dedicated for sure, but their training has to be heavily improvised. When the weather's okay, they are literally out there practicing on wheeled sleds on local roads. That is a massive logistical and safety nightmare. To get any real on-ice track time, the whole club has to pack up and drive to foreign tracks in Poland or Germany. That takes a massive toll. Time, money, sheer exhaustion. It's a tremendous burden on these young athletes and their families.
Part 5. Honoring a historic legacy.
So what do we do about this? How do we preserve this unique heritage? A continuous 65-year tradition is incredibly rare, and letting it fade away would just be a tragedy. To keep this legacy alive, the answer is actually pretty simple. They need basic fundamental facilities. We aren't talking about a billion-dollar mega complex here. They just desperately need the core infrastructure that any modern sports program requires to survive. Reestablishing a basic local training track and finally building a much-needed gymnasium would be a total game changer. It would give the local school a safe, dedicated space for their luge curriculum, and most importantly, it gives the next generation the exact same fighting chance their grandparents carved out of the snow decades ago.
It's honestly a testament to the sheer, stubborn willpower of the people of Helcmanovce that they've kept the sport alive for nearly 3 decades without a home track. But willpower alone can't defy the realities of modern elite sports forever. By investing in essential infrastructure, we can save this unique cultural anomaly from just becoming a memory. Thank you so much for joining me on today's Explainer, and I'm going to leave you with this one final thought. Without the basic foundation of the track and a gym, how can this historic, world-class cradle of luge possibly survive?